The hospice room smelled like borrowed time and lemon cleaner. Machines hummed like they were trying to remember a song. My father's hand was light in mine, bone and paper, and the final gravity of a man who had always been heavier than he looked. "Sebastian," he said, and it came out of him like a secret dug out from under a floorboard. "I have another son." The words slid across the bed and landed in my chest with an awful, perfect fit, like a key in a lock that shouldn't belong to your house. He let go of my fingers long enough to pull at the blanket and fish a small velvet pouch from somewhere under his gown. His hands shook. Inside was a fountain pen, navy blue, gold nib dulled by years of signing things that needed to become real. Engraved on the barrel, R.F., my father's initials. He pressed the pen into my palm and closed my fingers around it like he was giving me permission and not a sentence. "Find him," he said. "Please." "And the name?" I asked, because sometimes you hang your fear on the smallest nail and hope it holds. He swallowed. A nurse entered and flicked her eyes toward the monitors, then ghosted out when she saw my face. My father's chest shallow rose, shallow fell. He reached for the tray table, knocked his water over, muttered a curse so soft it sounded like a prayer, and found an envelope beneath the pitcher. Inside, a storage locker key and a yellow sticky note with 3 words in his printing: Evan/Toby-Ren Street. Toby, or Evan. Ren Street. "Dad," I said, and the second word broke in the middle like it had never learned to be said by a grown man. Is he?" He shook his head, small, stubborn. "I wanted to, before." He blinked hard. "Please." I tucked the pen into my pocket like a new bone, promised him, out loud, that I would, and watched his chest finish the work it was doing. There is nothing to prepare you for the moment a person stops being a person you can speak to and becomes only the person you will speak about. I pressed the pen against my thigh until it hurt and thought, how much else did this thing sign that I never saw? The funeral was a blur of suits and casseroles and people beginning sentences with "your father was" and ending them with something truer about themselves than about him. My mother sat very straight on a folding chair and did not look at me when the pastor said, "complicated." People handed me their phone numbers and their grief like I was going to invoice them for both. After, the lawyer, Ms. Hale, small and a sort of precise, pulled me aside at the reception. "There's a special provision in the will for a minor. The details are sealed pending identification." A minor. The word landed at an angle in my head. I looked at the pen in my breast pocket. I felt the weight of the locker key in my trousers, like a coin I could not spend. At home, I sat at my kitchen table with my father's pen between my fingers and the key glinting under the light, like 2 little moons. The sticky note lay on the wood. Evan/Toby-Ren Street. Toby, or Evan, Ren Street. The pen made a tiny click as it rolled. It sounded like yes and no at the same time. The storage locker was a 10 by 10 cube of dust and secrets. I recognized none of it. Receipts with a P.O. box, a leather folio with printed emails that felt like the first draft of a lie, lines like "monthly support as discussed" and "transfer confirmation, T. Finch." A shoebox with snapshots, parks and corners, playgrounds and church steps. No faces. In one, a wooden sign, Ren Street Community Park. In another, the corner of a pediatric clinic window with a poster for vaccinations. In an envelope, a photocopy of a birth certificate application with the boxes for father blank and mother Fay. Line obscured by the fold, like the paper itself wanted to spare me. Fay. The name sat there like a match waiting to be struck. I stared at it for a long time before I folded the paper back up and put it on the bottom of the pile, like you can bury a word under more paper and ask it to be less flammable. I made a list. People do this when the world refuses to narrow itself. Ren Street parks within 2 hours, clinics near Ren Streets, P.O. Box location. The pen left a blue groove in the paper. My father's handwriting sat on the sticky note like it had been waiting all along to be noticed. I went to Ren Streets. There are more than you think. In one, Ren is a cul-de-sac with a cracked basketball hoop, a grandmother watching from a metal chair, 3 kids throwing a ball and not noticing the man who looked like he was trying to recognize an entire life from the smell of a neighborhood. In another, Ren is a strip with a laundromat and a payday loan building and a bodega where the clerk said, "Finch? The old man? He used to buy yellow flowers on Thursdays." He pointed me toward a park with a swing set that squealed. It became a ritual. I'd leave my apartment on Saturdays with coffee in a thermos and my father's pen in my shirt, knock on the memory of maps, ask careful questions like I was a census worker for regret. I went to 4 clinics and learned the smell of waiting rooms that expect children, crayon and hand sanitizer, and the sound of a cartoon through thick glass. I reread emails that said nothing I could arrest. Some nights I dreamed of a man my age, with my father's eyes and my mother's way of pinching the bridge of her nose when she was tired. I pictured the 2 of us in a kitchen somewhere, adult to adult, awkward and relieved at the same time. I pictured telling him 1,000 things, and at the end, saying the one that mattered. I didn't know. I came as soon as I did. On a gray afternoon, when the light had decided it was too much work to be anything but a smear, I sat in the car outside a community center, with Ren painted on the side in blue, watching the world pour itself into a puddle. A father passed, holding the hand of a kid with a plastic dinosaur. A woman with a green umbrella counted to 5 and took the last 5 steps, because sometimes we make deals with the sidewalk doesn't honor. Ren Street Community Park was 3 blocks east. The sign in my father's photograph had splinters in the wood now, the letters chipping, but the word was the same. I stood there like a man waiting for a bus he hadn't paid for and did not deserve to ride. I walked into the park. It was the kind of parks reserved for people who forgot their coats. There were 2 swings, one missing a seat, and the other held together by dutiful knots. A boy sat in the sandbox with his tongue pressed to his lip, like he was trying to tell his mouth to concentrate. He rolled a truck back and forth, careful about the edge between sand and cement, keeping the wheels just exactly on the imaginary line. He had a cowlick that refused instruction. He looked 6, maybe 5, with a seriousness that children inherit from adults and make look lighter. I have my father's eyes. When I looked at the boys, it was like the wrong mirror, one that shows you not yourself, but the person who thought of you when they gave you your face. A woman's voice behind me called, "Toby!" That sing-song of someone who has said the name 1,000 times small and 1,000 times loud. I turned because you turn when someone says the name you've been carrying in your pocket for a year. She came into view with that stride that says, "I have done this crosswalk before and will do it again, and I am now immune to cars." She wore a coat the color of rain and a scarf the color of start over. She bent and kissed the boy's hair, and he said, "I was on the line the whole time. And she said, "I see it." And he believed her because she did. She straightened and saw me, and her mouth did the thing mouths do when they are asked to make a shape and decide to make none instead. "Fay." We stared at each other like people who have no interest in sharing a past and are nonetheless joined at the wrist by it. I felt absurd for being alive and standing and full of whatever it is a human is full of at 3:17 in the afternoon in a park. She reached for Toby without moving him, a reflex like you put your hand on a hot stove to teach yourself a rule. "Sebastian," she said finally, the word landing on the ground between us and refusing to be anything else. I started and stopped, because what does a man say at the collision of two entirely different maps? I had imagined a man my age. Here was a boy with my father's eyes and her certainty in the way he was already learning to hold his jaw when he concentrated. She said, "Not here." It wasn't an order, it was grace. She didn't ask why I was there. She knew exactly why. "Come by at 7, when he's asleep." She gave me the address, and her eyes looked at mine like a sentence she had to serve was about to be up. I left because I had no business staying. In the car, I leaned forward and put my forehead on the steering wheel like it had done something wrong, and then laughed, and it sounded like a man who had forgotten how to do it without the sound turning into something else. I put the pen against my teeth, and my teeth made that dull click that says, "Yes, the world has decided against you today. Yes, you still have to make a decision before night." At 7, I knocked on a door that had seen me a different version of me in a different life. She opened, and the house smelled like soap and something baked that had failed beautifully. A dinosaur on the coffee table watched me with his mouth open in perpetual surprise. We sat at her kitchen table with 2 mugs and no appetite for pretending we weren't drinking what we were drinking. The light over the stove made its own small circle of mercy. In another room, a noise machine whispered at the same frequency as a mother's prayer. "I need you to be a person about this," she said without cruelty. "Not a weapon." "I don't know if I can," I said, which felt like the right place to start. "Toby is 5. He's Toby." She smiled and then decided not to, because the number of smiles available sat next to the number of apologies, and both were running low. "Your father and I—" She stopped, rolled her shoulders back like she was setting a box down. "It was late in us. You were gone a lot. I was angry a lot. Your father was—" She laughed, a small awful laugh. "He was the sun in a room. And the worst part is I didn't even like him at first. He came to fix the photocopier at the nonprofit and ended up telling stories about ink the way my grandfather used to tell stories about machines in the mill. He made broken look temporary." "You're aware of the irony?" I said, because in the absence of a moral compass, my mouth has always been delighted to be clever. "Yes," she said, and didn't wince. "He was the last person I should have let in. He was older than wrong. He was married to your mother. I knew who he was. You were at your father's house the night I realized I was in a room with a man I was going to hurt by accident if I kept standing there and not leaving. Do you think I don't hear it? Every time I pick up a spoon? Do you think your name is not a stone in my mouth on some days?" We sat in that and let it be as ugly as it is. "Did he know?" I asked. "Yes." She racked both hands around her mug like a person holding something that might want to get away. "He told me he would tell you. He told me he had a trust set up, that he would come clean, and that if I told you first it would make you hate us both, atomically. He told me he would be braver later." She blinked as if the idea of later had physically left the room. Later arrived wrong. I let the pen roll between my fingers, each click a metronome for a body trying to sit and not stand and not end something already ended. He asked me to find him, I said. He said another son, and I heard a man. I know, she said. When I saw you at the park, the look on your face made me want to, I don't know, undo the last decade, invent a different father for my son. Invent a different version of myself, even if it meant I never met Toby. But that's not how this goes. This goes like this. She pushed a file across the table with all the formality of a pastor handing a marriage license to sinners. His birth certificate, blank father, my name, pediatric records, contact for the estate attorney because I told her you would come, DNA, if your brain needs data. It's never what your heart needs, but I know how mine's are. I need both, I said. Then take both, she said. And don't do to Toby what was done to you. Don't make him a place to put the hurt for choices that are ours. That's my only ask. She cried once. It was small and quiet, and she did it into her own sleeve. We spoke about schedules, about long words children don't need yet, about animals and building blocks, and the 5-year-old's serious interest in the physics of sand that refuses to be a road. On the way out, I stood in the doorway like a thief deciding whether to confess. I turned back and said, I don't forgive you. I don't forgive him. But I want to not do the thing I know how to do best? Run? She asked. Ruin, I said. The DNA test looked ridiculous. 2 swabs and a bag and the choreography of trying not to touch your life with your hands. The results came on a Tuesday when half the world spins rashers of bacon and the other half forgets to eat breakfast. Half siblings, 90-something%. It felt less like science and more like the principle of gravity. Here you both are, hold the same center. Ms. Hale scheduled a meeting at her office the way people schedule storms on calendars for the sake of feeling competent. She slid a document across the desk with all the formality of a pastor handing a marriage license to sinners. Your father established a trust 5 years ago. Beneficiary, Toby Finch. Disbursement in stages, education and health releases, later a primary distribution at 25. The trust requires a named family guardian to affirm identity. If you sign, we unlock the structure and appoint a professional trustee alongside Ms. Hale so that no one has too much to do and everything has more than one set of eyes. You need me to make him legitimate, I said, tasting the word and finding it sour.
I need you to do what your father should have done while he could, she said, with the small mercy of a person who doesn't pretend lawyers don't have opinions. And yes, the trust currently reflects your father's inability to come all the way clean. He planned to fill in the blanks in person. In my line of work, we have a saying, people die at inconvenient moments. It's our job to make sure children don't pay full price for that. My mother took the news like a woman being asked to lift a couch and discovering it had been filled with bricks. She sat at her kitchen table that had held every Sunday roast of my childhood and said, I kept thinking it was your fault. She shook her head at her own confession. What a relief to be wrong. It's not your fault either, I said. We both looked at the spot near the sink where my father used to stand like gravity. The radio on the counter pretended to be busy giving the weather. Do you want to meet him? I asked. She nodded once. Not as boy who did this to me, as boy who survived us. At Ms. Hale's office, I pulled the fountain pen from my pocket like it was finally ready to do the right work. I signed where she pointed, my name familiar and strange in the same line. The ink was blue and precise, and the nib made that whisper-scrape sound I recognized from crosswords and IOUs, and the mortgage on a house my father had almost kept. I thought about keeping it, I said, turning the pen in my fingers, feeling the engraved initials with my thumb. It's yours, she said, but relics are heavy. You can put it down." I set the pen on her desk like a man leaving a burden at a border crossing. I picked up something else instead, crayon and paper, and a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands that Toby had pressed into my palm after a supervised, utterly normal afternoon at the park where we said things like, "That truck is red," and "How high can you swing?" and not, "How do you carry a betrayal without dropping it on a child?" "I like Bass," he said, when I introduced myself, stumbling over the syllables of Sebastian. "Uncle Bass." Anyone who tells you names don't matter has never had to decide which one a child should call them. There is no version of this story where I reconcile with my father. He is gone, and the last thing he said to me was an assignment I didn't volunteer for. There is a version where I do not let a 5-year-old boy carry any of his debt. I have chosen that one the way you choose a sober friend to drive when you are too drunk to trust yourself, because the consequences insist. Sundays are pancakes now. My mother learned how to make them smiley face, and Toby learned how to flip them 1 inch off the pan while a grown man pretends not to panic at bacon grease popping. She calls him sweetheart on the 2nd Sunday, like she had been rehearsing the word in her mouth all week to make sure it wouldn't break when it came out. Fay and I are not a romance-turned-puzzle-turned-miracle. We are 2 adults who did the math and decided friendship with guardrails beats any other headline we could write. Her boundaries are a map I keep in my back pocket. Mine are too. We have a shared calendar app that would make a stock analyst faint with joy. On the table by my mother's sink, in front of the radio that still reports weather as if it has never been wrong, sits my father's ring in a small dish where we both pass it and neither of us picks it up. You might think we are making a shrine. We are not. We are letting a symbol have a seat like any other guest, and reminding ourselves that nobody gets to run the room anymore.
Sometimes I take Toby to the library on Ren Street and watch him learn the physics of whispering. Sometimes I sit at the edge of the sandbox and let him draw a road exactly along the line between sand and cement, careful and certain. He likes to show me where the wheels go. I like to tell him, "I see it," and watch his shoulders drop like that was all he needed. I went to the cemetery once more with the drawing in my pocket and the habit of talking to stone in my mouth. I set the fountain pen on my father's grave the way you set down a box you have carried too far. "I found your son," I said. "He is 5 and serious and perfect at telling sand what to be. He is my brother. He will grow up knowing that adults make a mess and adults clean it up, and that he is neither the mess nor the mop." I put the drawing beside the pen long enough to memorize the color. I put the drawing back in my pocket and left the pen. My mother asked me later if I wanted to go back for it. I said no. I have other things to write with now. When people ask me what I found after a year of looking, I tell them the truth. I thought I would find a man. I found a boy who needed someone to stand between him and the storm that already happened, and a man inside myself I had been trying not to meet.